All right, guys, so this is going to be my February 2024 official election prediction based on where we're at right now. The first thing I want to do is give some context to these predictions. We're going to take a look at where the polls are and roughly base it off of this. You can see Biden, a really bad recent approval rating poll, just 38% approval. These are all the Trump Haley polls. It's just a total blowout for Trump. Haley's only staying in the race, hoping something happens to Trump in terms of his legal situation. Maybe she can swoop in. But you can see this is the big thing we're looking at. General election, Trump versus Biden. Trump sitting about +2. Even with that Quinnipiac poll, we know how liberal they are, skewing the data. Once that gets out of here, then I think Trump, in terms of the overall spread, will be around +3.5, which is just crazy when you compare to where we were in February of 2020, when really Trump had a decent approval rating in February because that was before the pandemic, and Biden was still +5.5 in terms of popular vote over Trump. You take a look at these numbers, Biden Trump. The final average was 7.2. Biden won the popular vote by 4.5 points. Pretty crazy numbers. Biden being +7.5. Biden being +7 compared to where we are right now with Trump being +1. So great news for Trump there. Taking a look at the swing states. Arizona, Trump looks decent in, although I will caution people, this is very early polling. This is low amount of polls. You can see just 2 polls in 2024 in Nevada, but they do look relatively positive for Trump there. Wisconsin, Rust Belt states are going to be crazy close. You can see basically a tie. Michigan, this is the surprise state where Trump, in the 2 polls in 2024, has enjoyed decent leads in just the Trump v. Biden matchups. When you include RFK and all the others, Trump actually performs slightly better. Pennsylvania is going to be very close. You can see Biden basically a tie there. North Carolina, a state that Trump won in 2020 and 2016. The recent polling there, well, there's only one poll in 2024, but it's very positive. Trump +10. I don't think he's going to win North Carolina by 10, obviously, but that is very good for him. And then Georgia, Trump. It's very important that Trump takes back Georgia. That is the key, in my opinion, for a Republican victory in 2024. So this is a Trump-Biden matchup. We are just going to go through this, and I will just probably go through all the states that are kind of obvious. We know all these states on the West Coast very obviously going to Biden. Hawaii also going to Biden. When you move to Trump, you've got Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, North and South Dakota, Nebraska. The one district possibly could go to Biden. We'll come back to that. Colorado, people are talking about Colorado being a swing state. Yeah, I saw a few polls in Colorado. One was like Biden +9. I'll lighten the shade a little bit. I don't think Trump can win it in 2024. It would be a very rapid change. It would require something like them trotting Biden out during the debate and him just being completely incoherent and like just not being able to talk. If that happens, then maybe Trump could also win Colorado. Utah, obviously we're going to assume Trump wins that. New Mexico, that's Biden. Trump winning all these states. Also Texas, kind of just all the obvious ones here. Iowa, really not a swing state anymore. Minnesota, you could make an argument kind of like Colorado, maybe even more than Colorado, because there are some very close polls there. We'll lighten the shade a little bit, but I'm still going to give it to Biden at this point. Illinois, obviously, going to Biden. All of these dimple states going to Biden. Outside of New Hampshire, Trump will be taking all of the SEC country. We will be coming back to Georgia, Florida at this point. If you look at the registered voters, it's Republican plus about 600K, which is just crazy. We saw Trump win Florida in 2020 surprisingly by 3 points. A lot of people thought that would be a state decided then by less than 1%. It wasn't that close. And then obviously DeSantis, the trouncing victory in the midterms, winning by 20 points. Certainly Florida, that's huge for conservatives, the fact that it's trended actually to being not a swing state. It kills a lot of the Democratic math to make it easier for them, because in 2016 and 2020, in terms of paths, they had a lot easier paths. It's a little bit different now with Florida and Ohio both being more conservative states. You do have South Carolina being more conservative. You do have Kentucky, West Virginia, Indiana as well. as Tennessee. And then Biden very likely taking Virginia. You could talk about Glenn Youngkin. Maybe there's a chance Trump can win Virginia in 2024. I think it would require something to come out with Biden to where he's just horrible in the debates. He looks completely lost. But other than that, I do think Democrats, based off of the demographics there, will be winning Virginia in 2024. Also, New York. I mean, they're going to win New York. Come on, let's be honest. I know there was a poll that said Biden was only up by 9 points, but it'd be completely shocking. And then I believe we're on to the swing states. Now, you can see it's virtually tied. Oh, I forgot Alaska. I'm sorry about that. Alaska is always really late based on where they're located. The time difference, their polls always close at like 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. But let's get to the swing states. So Nevada, Arizona, I feel very strongly right now, especially about Arizona, but also Nevada. When you look at some of the polls, that Trump will win these states, I feel just more strongly about Arizona. So that's why I'm going to make it a darker shade than Nevada. But Trump needs to win one of these states, I would say, to give him just a ton more paths. And then the other state that's very key for Trump, you can see it's at 233 to 218. The other state that's very key, also this district can go to Trump. It's Georgia. And I think Trump is going to win Georgia in 2024. I think Georgia is a conservative state in general. When you look at the voter demographics in 2020, the absurd amount of people that voted from inner cities, from mass population centers, DeKalb, Fulton, Atlanta, Georgia. That's how the Democrats won this state. This was not something to where the Democrats overperformed in rural areas or anything like that. They jammed the ballot box with people that, quite frankly, really don't care about politics. They used fear-mongering. Georgia, in general, is a conservative state, even with all the big cities. And you look at the recent polls, Trump's up 9, he's up 10 in them. I think if you're predicting in February, it'd be very hard to pick anybody but a Republican to win Georgia. North Carolina, it's going to be close. Trump barely won it in 2020 and 2016, but I'm going to give it to Trump again, just based off of, all the polls that we've seen. And it's not even just the polls, it's also the sentiment of the American people with how pathetic Biden has been. They admitted on Thursday he's totally lost. He's old. They can't charge him because he is so mentally handicapped. And then he comes out in a press conference, messes up about 20 things, and says, oh, he's all there. He's perfectly fine. It's just a charade. It's a clown show. And then moving on to the 3 Rust Belt states. Normally, when I look at the Rust Belt states, I think Michigan is more liberal, but based off of the recent polling, I'm going to give Trump Michigan. These 2 states are brutal to predict. Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, they're coin flips. What I'll do is I'll give one of them to Trump. It's hard because one of them's 19 votes, the other's 10, but I'll give one of them to Trump. I'll give one of them to Biden. I just think predicting right now, trying to be as honest and realistic as possible. Both of them in terms of polling data are toss-ups. If you look at 2020, Biden won both of these states by less than a single point. So it's hard for me to really say, you could make the argument based off of how bad Biden's approval rating is, and it is the worst in history, that Trump should win both of these states, even if they're very close, just based off of the sentiment. But I'm going to say, listen, we'll split it up a little bit. New Hampshire, I am going to give I think New Hampshire's a slightly more Democratic state. When it comes to Maine, I will split them up a bit. I'll give Trump those 2, and then I'll give Biden those. But it's going to be pretty close in Maine. And then when it comes to Nebraska, I do think Trump ends up sweeping it, just barely getting all of the electoral votes in Nebraska. If Nebraska was like every other state, Trump would have no problem winning it. But because it's split up into little districts, it's a little bit tougher because of the bigger cities like Omaha skewing more to the left. That's why it's harder for him to win those. But I think now, with the unlikability of Biden, this is what we could be looking at, around a 304 to 234. I think this is, not that this is a conservative prediction, but based off of where we are right now in terms of polls, I do think this is a relatively fair prediction on the election. 304 to 234. Maybe even I'm being a little bit too nice to Biden when you look at Biden's numbers. let's see if we can go back to this and actually see Biden, Trump. Oh, it's going to friggin' take a year to go back to this. So go back to here and then go back to, what did I want to go to? I want to see his approval rating. Yeah, let's look at his approval rating versus Trump. So Biden right now, it's actually gone up slightly the last time I saw it, minus 15.5 basically. Oh, you can say it's trending in the wrong direction again. He got a little bump up. I think it was because of the gas prices, but it's relatively the same. It's not going to look good for Biden. He's just mentally incapable of handling this job. It is remarkable that, on February 12th, Trump, in 2020, 5 points better than Biden. The reason it's so remarkable is because when you have 80% of the mainstream media against you, it's kind of hard to have, and I'm not trying to defend Trump, I'm just saying this is the reality of it. The media bias against Trump is so ridiculous, and it's impossible to really fully grade a president. So a lot of grades and approval ratings are based off of perception. That's why it's so surprising that Biden, who's got the media in his back pocket, is still sitting minus 5 points compared to where Trump was. And Trump was 3 points lower than Obama, and Obama was 3 points lower than Bush. What I'll say is, based on where we are now, presidents are going to have lower approval ratings just because everything's so divided, and we have the access to information we have, the echo chambers with social media. But still, that is a significant difference of 5 points. Now, obviously, Trump's approval rating, it went down because of the pandemic. And then also you can say the January 6th situation that a lot of people, I'm not going to talk about that right now, but you can see that it goes way down in July. That's because of the pandemic. It was actually decent heading into the pandemic there. And then it gets crushed because Trump's number one thing was the economy. But either way, I do think right now, this is pretty much where we're looking at in terms of an electoral map. Now, you could argue, well, if Trump gets charged, it's going to mess everything up. No independent's going to vote for him. But you would be predicting that. You really can't predict that right now. We don't know what's going to happen with Trump and his legal situation. This is just based off of the polls. And I think many Americans are not dumb enough to really believe any of those sham charges against Trump, considering many of the prosecutors are extremely liberal. The judges are all liberal. You can look back on their history. They all hate Trump. Why would anyone believe any of that? It's all bias. It's just ridiculous. Like, if you actually want us to believe Trump is guilty of this stuff, why not get a pure independent judge to rule over it rather than some crazy 90% Democrat infested city where they're just going to be so biased? It's like, how can we even take this seriously? It's stupid. It's a waste of time. It's like the January 6th committee. They're all liberal, and then they have the sham committee at 8 o'clock because they want it in prime time. You want to talk about a kangaroo court. Oh my God. But either way, this is where I see the election right now with Trump. I think this is a very fair prediction. I mean, you could maybe argue that, well, Biden can also take Michigan and Pennsylvania. I mean, listen, let's be honest, that does swing the election a bit. That's why these elections are so crazy close. This electoral college is just, it's remarkable how close all of these elections are. People, they get manipulated, and it's like, well, Biden won by 7 million votes or something. No, that's irrelevant. You don't understand how voting works in America if you believe that he actually won by about 40,000 votes in a few swing states. Because if we just went by popular vote, we would all be subject to the groupthink of California and of New York. And nobody wants to live under that. That's why states need their own power, and you have to disperse the power through the Electoral College. And let's be honest, it's not like South Dakota, North Dakota have all that much power anyways, but if you can separate it a little bit, it makes for a more organic view and represents different lifestyles in America. Because if you live in California, you live in LA, you're going to have a lot different lifestyle than somebody living in rural South Dakota. But either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on X. Link to that's always in the description.